Today's podcast of Hellbent for Horror is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Hellbent for Horror. Audible has over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Hi, and welcome to Hellbent for Horror, a podcast devoted to all things related to horror. I'm S.A. Bradley, and I'm a lifelong movie lover, but my heart belongs to horror. My biggest thrill, however, is getting to talk to people about this stuff. I really want to start conversations with you. As I've said before, I love all types of horror. It can be films, or books, or music, or paintings, or even real-life horror. But when we talk about real-life horror, the definition of what is real can be up to interpretation. And when you talk about the paranormal, like ghosts and poltergeists and demons, the definition of what is real almost becomes a moot point. I bring all of this up because the world is getting the crap scared out of it right now by the new James Wan movie, The Conjuring 2. I liked the first one, and so did a lot of people. The original grossed $318 million in the theaters. And justifiably so. The original Conjuring gave me a few jumps. I'll be surprised if the sequel isn't a big hit, because I think that these movies come at the right time for a changing of the guard for a new boogeyman for the popular culture. Out with the zombies, in with the ghosts and demons. Of course, movies like The Conjuring come with an additional magic spell attached to them. It's a phrase from sacred text, and it is hidden in plain sight. When these words are read, a binding spell is cast on the reader that starts an obsession. The words? Based on true events. In a world where people don't believe their elected officials or even their doctors anymore, that spellbinding phrase cuts through defenses. People just believe. And once a person is hexed, it's hard to break that spell. Now, I get it completely. Sometimes that blur between what is real or not can add to the excitement of a movie, and hey, I admire a little Carney Barker flair to liven things up. But it brings me to another odd confession of mine. I don't really believe in the paranormal. I know. Like Fox Mulder, I really want to believe, because in my view, I find the idea of ghosts being real as a comforting idea, because if there's ghosts, it means that even the afterlife is imperfect. It can get screwed up. It means that entropy is multidimensional. It makes me feel better about forgetting my glasses at a restaurant. I really like the idea of ghosts. I like the idea of poltergeist, and there's even a part of my lizard brain that wants demons to be real. I guess you can say I'm just a romantic at heart. But in the cold gray of dawn, I love the romanticism, but I just don't believe it's real. I know. This sounds like a career-limiting statement for a horror guy, right? With that said, I don't really believe in werewolves either, but it's never stopped me from enjoying werewolf movies. And honestly, I don't think I've ever been asked by someone if I believe in werewolves. But when I say I don't believe in ghosts, I can physically feel people's disappointment. And I understand. There's a lot of wonder and faith and even hope invested in the paranormal. And let me say, I wasn't always of the opinion that I have now. I was, at one time, hexed, and it took a lot to break that spell. And weirdly enough, I'm hopeful I might change my mind again. Now, ghost stories are as old as communication, and different cultures and societies have different relationships with ghosts. But all the ancient cultures believed that the spirit exists separate from the body and can still be present after the body is gone. And that's a beautiful, poetic belief. That someone could have such an impact on people or a place that their presence is felt long after their body is turned to dust. And I'm sure hours could be spent talking about how connection to the spirits of the past have enriched lives and produced harmony. But that's not this podcast, because nobody who goes to The Conjuring 2 with the words based on true events buzzing in their brains is going there to see a friendly ghost. We want the cautionary tale. We want to come face to face with uncontrollable fear. We have a fascination with the worst case scenario. I mean, it's not enough to just have ghosts, right? There are 3 different types. The 3 most common spirits in the paranormal are ghosts, poltergeist, and demons. Now, poltergeists are the passive-aggressive spirits. They bang on walls, they knock over books like they're saying, "Perhaps you didn't hear me the first time." And then there's demons. They're pure evil. So 2/3 of the kind of spirits you can meet aren't exactly there to brighten your day. And even ghosts normally scare the crap out of the people who see them. And if a spirit's presence is felt somewhere, it permanently marks that place with a sense of foreboding. Houses are haunted. Forests are haunted. Old libraries are haunted. I had mentioned in a previous episode that I was brought up in an extreme fundamentalist religion. One of the beliefs was that demons were watching you all the time, trying to possess you. This may have been one of the reasons that I was so drawn to the paranormal, even at an early age. Of course, I left that religion on my own. I wasn't a believer. Yet, I didn't abandon my fascination with the paranormal. In fact, my fascination deepened. I think it was because it seemed like everybody I would meet had a ghost story. It seemed to be a universal experience. Run-ins with the spirit world seemed to cross all borders of religious affiliation or age or race or education. I had a friend in college who said she and her family had a healthy relationship with a ghost in their home. Outside of the occasional scare, she said it was no different than having birds nest in your porch. Okay. When I served in the Air Force, I was told the fire station I was sleeping in was haunted by a ghost. When I moved to other states, I was told about their local ghosts. When I went overseas, I was met with more ghosts. But it was the spirits and legends and beasts of my hometown that really hexed me. And it was a hometown connection that eventually brought me face to face with Ed and Lorraine Warren. I have another confession. I was a teenage ghost hunter, strictly amateur, of course. I have a feeling that most teenagers have a brush with this, but I went out of my way to explore the true tales of the supernatural my hometown had. And my hometown had quite a few. You know, just like your hometown. I grew up in a Pennsylvania coal mining town. The population was mostly first-wave immigrants, Polish, German, Irish, Italian. Many of the great-grandparents who immigrated to America were still alive when I was a kid. They brought their superstitions and myths from the old country along with them. You would see the occasional hex symbol on German homes, usually on the garages. The Irish, they had their horseshoes. The kind of coal mining that my hometown did was strip mining. For those that don't know what that is, you don't just make a mine shaft and bring the coal up from below. Strip mining means you take steam shovels and you strip the earth off over a huge area of land. Then after you remove all the minerals from that layer, you strip again and again and again. You're left with huge open pits that look like craters on the moon. By the time I was born, the heyday of King Coal was over. Oil replaced coal. But I was left with rusted and abandoned mining equipment and buildings all over the place, and miles of dark black craters as my playground. Maybe it was because of all these deep, dark holes that so many stories centered around the devil coming up to the surface. These stories usually involve somebody saying something they shouldn't or going somewhere they shouldn't. In the stories, they meet a smiling stranger who tries to coax them to go with them somewhere. Sometimes they went and were never heard from again. But other times they'd try to leave and this stranger would grab their arm. They'd pull away and the stranger would laugh and watch them run. Of course, when they got home, they'd find a burn mark in the shape of a hand on their arm. I'm sure those were tales to keep kids like me from playing in the strip mines, because sometimes the ground would just open up because old tunnels would cave in. And there were haunted mines. One was the resting place of 10 miners who were lost in a collapse. If you went there at night and sat at the edge of the mine, you could hear the lost miners singing and whistling in the abyss. And I think every high school that we had a weeping ghost in the library or a weeping ghost in the stairwell. And then there was the ghost in the Catholic hospital in town. It was known as the Shroud. It would always happen on the midnight shift. People would see what they would assume to be a nun out of the corner of their eye or just turning a hallway corner. In the morning, they'd find out that someone had died during the night near where the shroud was seen. And then there was the curse of the stone couch. Now, the stone couch was a granite rock formation on a desolate stretch of road in the woods that really did look like a couch made of stone. But nobody wanted to sit in it. The stone couch has a curse. Now, what the curse is depends on who tells the story. It's either cursed by the ghost of a Native American woman and her child, or the ghosts of a family of settlers who died of influenza right on that spot. Now, people would see ghosts and orbs at night, but the real draw was to see if anyone had the guts to sit on the stone couch. Here's how the curse worked. If you sit on it once, you would encounter bad luck, and you'd have scratches appear on your body. If you sit on it twice, someone you know will die. Sit on it a third time, and you will die. Full disclosure, I never sat on the damn couch. But my favorite ghost story had to do with a mausoleum that was set alone in a secluded part of the graveyard that was next to my high school. Yes, I went to a high school that had a huge graveyard next to it. The wrought iron fences lined the high school parking lot. How cool is that? This mausoleum was for one of the rich families in the area. It sat alone at the end of a long path that was flanked by trees on both sides. The legend was that the family patriarch was a devil worshiper. There were occult symbols mixed with crucifixes on the marble work, and inside the crypt was a statue of an angel that had horns and a tail, half angel, half devil. And at night, it would come to life and walk around in the crypt. If you got close enough, you could hear it. If you were really brave, you could look in through the little glass window in the door and see it. Just pray it doesn't see you. Now, what I can tell you is that from 7th grade to senior year of high school, I was in charge of a half dozen failed attempts at getting close enough to this grave to witness the paranormal. Now, crawling under the fence, no problem. Walking through the graveyard in the dark was easy with 4 or 5 people. But when we came to the edge of that tree line and saw that lone mausoleum glowing in the moonlight, something would happen. A weird wind would blow all of our candles out. Run away! Next time we brought flashlights. But we heard weird noises from the trees. Run away again. Next time we saw weird lights coming from the glass doors of the crypt. Run away! That last one, cars making left turns out of a nearby alley would briefly reflect their headlights on the glass. Every time we got scared, and every time we'd sit around and laugh. Why were we so scared? Because it was a good story. It had just enough left-of-center details to creep you out. Just enough details to let you make the choice whether to believe it or not. In the paranormal world, reality is in the eyes of the beholder. I explored the mausoleum in the daylight just to get a good look at this half angel, half devil. Even during the day, the place had a heavy feeling in the air. I looked in through the little glass window in the door. The initial glimpse made my hairs rise. Sure as shit, I saw the outline of 2 horns at the top of the statue's head. But then your eyes adjust, and you see that it's an olive branch wreath around the head, like a halo. The tail was just the way the shadows played off the creases in the robe that the angel wore. The occult symbols were actually Masonic symbols. But you could see, from this cramped angle you had to peer in to see anything, how a kid could interpret these shadows into a ghostly legend that survives to this day. My fascination with the paranormal kept on into my 20s and my 30s. I went to haunted places wherever I roamed. On good nights, I'd get creeped out, but I never saw anything that I'd relate to the supernatural. It was reading Jay Anson's world-famous book, The Amityville Horror, that I was first introduced to Ed and Lorraine Warren. Just in case you don't know what the story of the Amityville Horror is, it surrounds the haunting of the Lutz family after they move into a new house in Long Island. Unfortunately for them, the previous owners were murdered by their son in the house. And just as the ads for the book promised, all hell breaks loose. I was focused on the Lutz family and their terrifying 28 days in this haunted house, so the Warrens barely registered with me, except that they existed. The Warrens came to my attention again in the mid-1980s. A friend of mine went to hear them at a lecture at the University of Connecticut. It was a lot like the opening sequence in The Conjuring. The Warrens sat in a lecture hall and discussed their career involving demonic possessions and exorcisms. They showed blurry slide photos of floating orbs of light, and they showed pictures of people who were wounded during their possessions. It was horrific. But the most affecting moments were the recordings of exorcisms and spectral voices. Imagine a couple hundred people listening to amplified recordings of painful screams and groans in a dimly lit auditorium. At one point, Ed is on the recording, performing an exorcism. He calls out the demon, and suddenly the name Ed, 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 Ed echoes around the room, like multiple voices are calling out from all over. Ed and Lorraine Warren certainly knew how to set a tone. But what made them seem so authentic to me was that they were in direct contrast to the work they were involved in. They looked like suburban neighbors or older relatives. Ed was overweight, he wore an ill-fitting suit, and Lorraine never gave up on the beehive hairstyle. There was no pretense, no flair. They had a sense of humor about themselves, but they were dead serious about their work. But what got me obsessed, what got me to actually want to meet them in person, was another true story book. The book was The Haunted, One Family's Nightmare by Robert Curran. I bought the paperback because of the photo on the cover. It was an eerie shot of the home of the Smurl family where all the chaos would happen. I knew that kind of construction. The homes of coal mining towns in Pennsylvania have a very distinct look. I took it home to find out that the location of the story was West Pittston, Pennsylvania, a town about 30 miles from where I was raised. I knew the people of this area. They didn't suffer fools lightly or care much for flights of fancy. Something like this actually happened in my neck of the woods. This story was hitting home. Now, the book chronicles the ordeal of the family of Jack and Janet Smurl and Jack's parents who move into both sides of a duplex home. We called duplexes half-a-doubles back there. At first, the Smurls thought they had ghosts, probably a poltergeist, because items would be moved or lost, there'd be banging in the walls. Then things started to get freaky quickly. Shadowy figures come off the walls to attack the family. Disembodied voices call out to them. And then the voices scream at them. Something invisible bites Jack and leaves teeth marks. The family dog is violently thrown to a wall. The book goes out of its way to show the Smurls as devout Catholic churchgoers. When stuff gets crazy, they turn to their community and their church, and at first, they get support. People are willing to believe them and support them. At least they give them the benefit of the doubt. A kindly priest comes over and he blesses the home. But as things progress, the family is ostracized. The attacks seem constant, and the family is pushed beyond the point of exhaustion. If a family friend is sympathetic, the entity terrorizes them until they stay away. The Smurls even leave the house, and when they do, this evil spirit follows them. And that's when they contact Ed and Lorraine Warren. Lorraine, the psychic of the pair, tells them the awful news. There are 3 ghosts, but they are controlled by a 4th spirit. There is a demon in the house, and what it wants is to destroy the family. But its final purpose is to possess one of them. They are in a war zone, and there's no guarantee they'll survive. And that's where this story got under my skin, because the Warrens don't get rid of the demon. Priests do exorcisms, but they only temporarily quiet it. When the book ends, the family is still living with the horror. Somehow the admission of defeat made the Warrens seem even more legit. They weren't superheroes. They openly admitted they didn't understand why things happened or why things worked. They just went off faith. A little history about the Warrens. Since the 1950s, Ed and Lorraine worked as ghost hunters. Ed was a self-taught demonologist. I don't know how you do that. Lorraine was a spiritual conduit, however. She was a clairvoyant and light trance spirit medium. Together, they created the New England Society for Psychic Research. It was the first ghost hunting group in New England. They had been involved in a staggering 10,000 cases through their career. These included Amityville and the haunting of the Perron family, which became the basis of the movie The Conjuring. The Warrens also trained an entire generation of demonologists. They were basically the alpha and omega for modern ghost hunting. If I was going to find any real proof of paranormal activity, I'd find it with Ed and Lorraine Warren. My chance came in 1989. I had a friend who lived in Connecticut at the time, and he knew about the Warrens and their home in Monroe. The Warrens didn't charge anyone for their services as demonologists. How they made their money, they did it by doing the lecture circuit and, of course, book deals. But they also made money by opening an occult museum in their home. They would only allow a certain number of people one day out of the month inside for a guided tour. A guided tour that you took at your own peril. See, the Occult Museum grew out of their case files. They would occasionally find items that were either cursed or items that evil spirits became trapped in during exorcisms. According to Ed and Lorraine, if you destroyed the item, you just released the spirit back into the world. So they decided to keep the evil where they knew it would be safe from getting loose. In their basement. Right? The biggest set of balls in the universe. Of course, to hear them talk about it after 10,000 cases, there's really nowhere to hide. The devil knows them by name, so you either are protected by faith or you're not. It was a rainy morning when my friend and I showed up at their modest home in Monroe. There were about a dozen of us in the group. We were met by Lorraine. She smiled at us, but she was checking us out. Then I saw Ed, and I went over and shook his hand. He was wearing an unbuttoned sport coat. It was then that I saw the .32 caliber pistol in his shoulder holster. He saw that I noticed it, and he patted it. "Yeah, you saw that, huh? We have prayer to protect us from the spirits, but sometimes we attract some very disturbed people." He said, "You know, I had my eye on you, but Lorraine said you were clean." I couldn't tell if he was joking. It was time for the tour to begin. Ed lined us up in front of the basement door. We were given the rules. Stay together. Everybody follows Ed. Absolutely, positively, don't touch anything. If you do touch something, stop right where you are and tell Ed what you touched. Because we are going to be surrounded by cursed objects, powered by evil spirits or black magic. And none of those spirits want to be in the object they're trapped in. They'd much rather go home with you. I could feel my pulse in my neck. This seemed promising. Ed opened the basement door, and we filed in. My heart sunk a little when I saw the welcome mat. It had cartoon ghosts and witches on it that looked like they came from Hallmark cards. And then there were the plastic dime store jack-o'-lanterns in the hallway. And then there were masks and statues right out of Spencer's Gifts. And then there were the colored light bulbs. And then there were the signs of spooky lettering that said, "Beware" and "Haunted." Oh, no. We get to the end of the hallway and there's another door. Ed turns to us. "Okay, so that was the fun and games hall," said Ed. "But when we go through this door, it's all serious. Let us pray." Ed leads us in a protection prayer, asking God to bathe us in his mercy. And then he opens the door. It's very dark inside, and the air is close and stale. Ed turns on a sound system, and we're treated to a boys' choir singing hymns. The room is full of tables and shelves that are packed with artifacts. We walk slowly and carefully behind Ed. And in front of us, in a locked glass case, is Annabelle. Now, if you've only seen the movie, you don't know what Annabelle really looks like. In the movie, it's a pretty evil-looking porcelain doll, but the real Annabelle is a large Raggedy Ann doll, the biggest Raggedy Ann doll I'd ever seen, like the size of a child. And she is legitimately creepy. There's a handwritten sign on the case. It says, "Warning, positively do not open." Annabelle is the piece de resistance, the doll that hides a demon just waiting to possess somebody. We continue the tour. Of course, we need to turn our backs on Annabelle in order to do so. Some of the items on display are creepy. There's a voodoo doll in a bell jar. Ed tells us that a witch doctor gets a swatch of the victim's clothing and wraps a piece of meat in it to be an effigy. After applying the curse, he hides the voodoo doll near the victim's home. As the meat rots, the cursed person does as well. And then there was a wooden jewelry box. Inside the box is a demon who takes the form of a snake. If you open the box, though, you wouldn't see anything until the moment the snake bit you. And then it would go invisible again until it bit you again. It feeds off terror. For a few minutes, I had that buzz you get when you're frightened. But then something happened. Somebody bumped into something. The person acted like they stepped on a landmine. Ed walked over and took a look at what they touched. He said, "Nothing to worry about. That's just a decoration." It was then that I started to really take a look around. More damn Halloween Superstore masks. Why? I hear the other visitors gasping and pointing at a book on a table. What could it be? So I look over. I see a cheap-looking book with a pentagram painted on it. Written in the center is the Necronomicon. Really? The Book of the Dead? The one H.P. Lovecraft invented in his short story The Hound? Oh, no. There's a poorly painted picture of a naked woman. When he's asked about it, Ed says that it's a portrait of a Satanist who lived near here. The Grand Wizard of her satanic cult found out that she was a virgin, so he killed her and sacrificed her to Satan, right in the nearby woods. Ed then points to another bad oil painting of a guy wearing a red robe and hood. That is the Grand Wizard. What? Does this guy have a name? How could I not have heard of this in my research? How could this sensational murder not become major news? Ed says something about the church and the police keeping it quiet to avoid a panic, because Satanists are everywhere. Everywhere. The other visitors are nodding in agreement. I am not. Instead, I'm feeling something in my mind slipping away. The tour opens up to questions, so I ask Lorraine for an update on the Smurls. She's happy to tell me that after some additional exorcisms, they are finally rid of the demon. That was a real challenge, she says. I ask her if that was the most challenging case they ever had. Lorraine doesn't miss a beat. No, that would be the werewolf. That was a real challenge. Come again? Ed chimes in. Yes, we were involved in a real documented case of lycanthropy. And snap, just like that, the party is over. I could see that most of the visitors are still there with them, nodding with wide eyes. I have seen this before. I left the fundamentalist religion of my youth after I was blessed with the gift of doubt and the gift of skepticism. I got those gifts right after a moment of truth, where the religion had a very public belief that was debunked very publicly. It was obvious we were wrong, and everybody acted like nothing happened. They just nodded with wide eyes. It takes a big event to break a hex. Now, I think it's possible Ed and Lorraine Warren had actually been in the presence of the spirit world at least once or twice in their long career, and I have no doubt at all that Ed and Lorraine believed everything that they were talking about. And that's the problem. For whatever reason, they chose to believe all of the events they got involved in. They were lured into believing the Mickey Mouse version of Satanism that created hysteria in the 1980s. They seemed devoid of skepticism around the paranormal. They couldn't see the artifacts from the trinkets. And unfortunately, they got duped. The Amityville Horror, the case that brought them fame, was found to be a hoax cooked up over many bottles of wine by the Lutzes and their attorney, William Weber. And then there was the unfortunate Devil Made Me Do It trial in 1981. It was the first court case where a murder suspect claimed he was possessed by demons and wasn't in control. He blamed a botched exorcism that the Warrens did on his son. He said that they just moved the demon into him. Of course, that's the risk you run when you invoke binding spells using sacred words from the sacred texts. A true story. Spells can bounce back on you. Now, will any of this ruin my enjoyment of The Conjuring 2? No, not at all. I still get scared watching werewolf and zombie movies. And it's not like I don't believe that there's something out there. I do. A good doubter doesn't keep too many absolutes. But I think there's so much that we don't understand yet about nature itself that the word super is redundant when it's used with nature. What used to be magic in the ancient world is today's science. And like I said before, I'm hoping that I might change my mind again. In fact, I'm thinking of taking a midnight walk to a nearby haunted place very soon. It's called the Gates of Hell in Antioch, California. It sounds promising. Thanks for listening to my show. I'd love to hear back from you. You can email me directly at scott@hellbentforhorror.com. For you, the listeners of Hellbent for Horror, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. To download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/hellbentforhorror. If you like the show and you're curious about audiobooks, sign up for the service through Hellbent for Horror. It helps make this podcast sustainable for me, and I thank you in advance. And thanks for listening. Hellbent for Horror was written and broadcast by me, S.A. Bradley, and produced by me and Lisa Gorski. If you like the show, please consider writing a review on iTunes or Google Play. It really helps. Thanks a lot for listening. You can now subscribe to the Hellbent for Horror podcast. It's now available on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. You can also keep up with Hellbent for Horror on iTunes at iTunes Podcast. That's on Twitter. You can find more on our Facebook page at facebook.com/Hellbent for Horror, and I'm on Twitter at Hellbent Horror. You can also find more info on my website, hellbentforhorror.com. Till next time, stay hellbent.